Canada remains an ideal nation for refugees and asylum seekers. Today, we talk with Olivia Huynh, who is the executive director of the New Brunswick Refugee Clinic. Prior to her work at the NBRC, she completed a BCL JD at McGill University, where she volunteered with nonprofits focused on refugee rights and access to justice. She has also previously worked at a refugee law firm in Montreal. We'll talk about issues faced by refugees and asylum seekers within the province and the country. Here is what she has to say. Can you tell us about the NB Refugee Clinic?
Yes, so the New Brunswick Refugee Clinic is a nonprofit located in Moncton, and our mandate is to help people making risk-based immigration applications in New Brunswick who can't afford a private lawyer. So we primarily do refugee claims, and then for the clients that we're doing a refugee claim for, we can help them with like work permits, permanent resident applications. We sometimes do H&C applications on a case-by-case basis, that type of thing.
Canada still jails asylum seekers indefinitely. How is your organization dealing with this issue?
Yes, so one of the services that we provide is representing refugee claimants in detention hearings. So for example, if someone is detained by CBSA and they are an asylum seeker in Canada, they can contact our clinic and we would be able to help them during the detention hearing.
Recently, a former refugee lost his status for visiting his home to see his dying father. Should Canada amend this law, or is there any other route to go or handle this issue?
I definitely think that there should be more flexibility in looking at cases where refugees return to their home country. So I think there are lots of cases, for example, the situation you just mentioned where someone was returning to see a dying parent, where there might be a very strong reason for them to return. And it doesn't mean that they're not afraid or that they're not persecuted in their home country, but there's often a family problem, a health problem in the family or something similar that compels them to return, even though that they do feel they are in danger there.
What are the problems asylum seekers face in Canada?
So there are a lot of barriers that people face. I think one issue is obviously language barriers and being able to have accessible services, being able to know where to go for services or which organizations can help them, knowing what their rights are and what different immigration pathways and different options are based on their situation. I think something that's also been an issue recently is having long delays with receiving things like work permits or study permits that will allow them to continue their life in Canada and to be self-sufficient while they're waiting for their refugee claim to be heard. So I think all of those things are issues that that people are facing right now.
During the pandemic, did they face more problems?
Yeah, so I think there were a lot of issues during the pandemic. I think, for example, difficulty accessing services when things went online, finding it harder to connect to organizations because many places had reduced capacity following the onset of the pandemic. So our clinic tried to respond flexibly to our clients' needs. So based on what stage of the pandemic, based on the health regulations and the health risk to our clients, we moved a lot of our meetings and consultation services online through Microsoft Teams. And we also helped clients to connect to other organizations, and we did referrals so that we could make sure that all of their needs were being met during that time.
As you know, Canada wants to increase its immigration population. What sort of specific plans does Canada have for refugees?
Yeah, so I think it varies between the provinces, but I think there's a big push right now to increase immigration in order to meet the needs of the labor shortage. So for example, I think Quebec is looking at having an influx of newcomers in the coming years to meet the labor shortage there due to the pandemic. I believe the federal government is implementing a pilot program soon that will give people on study visas more flexibility in how many hours they can work based on
Right.
the constraints of their study visa. So I think it's really encouraging to see Canadians understand that immigration has a lot to offer Canada, and it's a great way to meet some of those issues that we are having right now.
Mhm. What specific services does your organization provide to asylum seekers and refugees?
Yeah, so we help them with the different stages of the refugee claim process. So submitting their claim, preparing them for their eligibility interview, arranging the medical exam, helping them apply for the work permit or study permit. And then we'll prepare them and help them gather evidence for their hearing, and we'll represent them at the hearing itself. And then based on the outcome, hopefully if they win the hearing, we'll be able to help them with their permanent residence application. And if the hearing is not successful, we'll look at alternative pathways for them, such as an application on humanitarian and compassionate grounds, depending on the case.
Right. What trends have you seen within New Brunswick, particularly those claiming, refugee status, or those who are having issues, getting refused, and then they will get deported, right? So, what sort of trends have you been seeing over the years?
Yeah, so I think so far we've had a good success rate with our clients, which has been encouraging. I think in cases where people are refused, it depends on what the reason for refusal is, but I think it's important for them to know that there can be other options for them, and for them to be able to connect to services where they can understand their rights and they can understand where their next step might be. So whether they have to leave Canada immediately, whether they can appeal, whether they can make an HNC application, if Canada is currently removing people to their country. I think those are all things that people need to understand if they receive a negative decision. And it's really important that they have access to that information, to those types of services.
Mhm. Do you think there's fraud within the refugee asylum process? Because we have read some news, particularly from Punjab, India. They have sort of, trying to get into the loophole and claim refugee status. What's your view about this?
So I personally am not aware of any fraudulent cases. I would say that the refugee claim process is quite vigorous. So in terms of the evidence you're expected to submit, the testimony you're expected to provide in the hearing, the evidentiary burden, I think it's a quite thorough process, and credibility is always one of the central issues in the refugee hearing.
Right,
So I have a lot of faith that all of the cases that are being approved, are legitimate claims.
right, right. What do you think about the quota system for Afghan refugees?
Yeah, so I think it's important to have a variety of programs that can respond flexibly to the needs of different countries. So if there's a crisis in one country, I think it's important to have programs that can respond to that immediate need. If there might be a sudden influx of refugees, if it might change the demographics of who's applying for refugee status in Canada.
Mhm.
So I think the important thing is to have programs flexible and that respond to what people's actual needs are and that are effective in bringing people to Canada.
Right, right. Do you think Canada is prepared to welcome more refugees in the coming years?
I definitely think so. And I think from my perspective, our clients have become really engaged in their communities. So they are working in Canada, their kids are attending school here, they're contributing to their communities. So I definitely think that they've had a positive impact on Canada and on New Brunswick specifically.
Right. What's your organization's vision for coming years?
So our vision is to continue providing these services to refugee claimants. We'd like to strengthen our connections to other regions. So we're currently located in Moncton.
Any last words about your organization or what the province should do more for refugees?
One challenge has been finding adequate housing for refugees that is affordable and accessible in whatever region of New Brunswick they're in. So I think housing continues to be a challenge.
Right.
But overall, we're always happy to help connect people to the services they need or to provide them with the referrals they need for their other challenges they're facing in Canada.
For the NB Media Co-op, this is Arun Budatoki.